Hi, welcome. I'm Sarah D, and this is...
I'm Dr. D.
Yes, and we're going to have another conversation. We're going to kind of continue on from last week. We talked about the Pledge of Allegiance, and it's basically, we're not pledging allegiance to the flag. We're pledging allegiance to the...
Republic for which it stands.
Yeah, and it's an ideal, really.
Yes.
It's an ideal. We're pledging, okay, we're going to try to set this ideal, and that ideal is going to be the topic of our discussion. Speaking about liberty and justice for all. Okay, so liberty is a form of freedom, right?
Yes.
Okay, and so I'm going to sing a song about that, but before I'm going to tell you a definition that we're going to use for freedom. Freedom is unrestrained choice to do anything at any time. Oh my goodness. Does that sound wonderful? Reminds me of Pinocchio. What about you?
Yeah.
Yeah, Pinocchio was unrestrained at that place, but was he?
Yeah.
Ugh. So that's what freedom is. The difference between freedom and liberty is choice constrained by the individual to support justice for all. More simply put, liberty is the just use of freedom. So here's a song that I wrote a long time ago when Dr. D was, he was teaching this to me when he was actually learning it in the, what was it called? The political...
Workshop.
Yeah, workshop of... You have to help me. I don't remember the name of it.
I can't remember the name of it.
Oh, just the workshop for short, right? Workshop
Yeah, the workshop.
Political analysis or something with Lynn and...
Vincent Ostrom.
Anyway. Freedom, I ask. What is freedom, some say? I had the words here, and I covered them up with my other words. Did you know that I had the freedom to do that? Did. And I was unrestrained. And it restrained me. That's our theme. Freedom, I ask. What is freedom, some say? It's doing what you want at any time. Freedom, some ask. What is freedom, I say? It's choosing what you think within your mind.
It's a Viktor Frankl thing.
It is.
Yeah.
About the good and bad in the life you have. So there's peace within every climb.
Very Viktor Frankl.
When my world looks dark and my dreams do fade, I can see the silver lining if I try. And a brighter day soon will come my way, whether in reality or in my mind. Might be happy doing that.
Yeah.
What you focus on grows. It's simple, you know. Focus on the sun and dark clouds fly. Sometimes I'm controlled at every turn. It's when I refuse to choose to learn. When I let deceitful habits rule. Chaos is my home. Think of Pinocchio. I play the fool.
Or Gulag Archipelago.
Oh, yeah. Freedom, I ask. What is freedom, some say?
I don't know.
It's doing what you think and what you want at any time. Oh, freedom, some ask. What is freedom, I say? It's choosing what you think within your mind. About the good and bad in the life you have. So there's peace within every climb. Your reality you create, you see, with each meaning you make in your mind. You're the master of each choice you make. You create the life you find. You make it. And you make it by what you think within your mind, that meaning that you make out of what's going on. So I want to be free to do that because I'm so mad and I'm really upset with what you do. Whatever. What happens? What happens when I take that kind of freedom?
Well,
Besides the fact that I might bruise your arm because I'm so strong.
so the problem was discussed long, long ago by a philosopher named, I can't remember his name right now.
We were talking about him earlier.
We were talking
Hobbes?
Hobbes, Thomas Hobbes.
Woo.
Thank you very much. Thomas Hobbes.
Calvin and Hobbes.
Yeah. Well, so Thomas Hobbes in the first book of Leviathan writes this story, and it's called On Man.
Okay.
And by man he means human. So we'll translate it into on humans.
Okay.
And he says that humans are fundamentally self-interested. That is, that we see ourselves first and we understand ourselves best. And that in a state where there are no constraints on our behavior and our choices, we would all choose to serve ourselves, and in doing so, we reach a state of equilibrium or a state of being where nothing is safe and everything's chaotic.
Because we're not the only one. Well, even if we are the only one there.
Well, if we're the only one there, then there's the time inconsistency problem with making choices today that don't serve us tomorrow, right?
Right. Cake and eat it too.
Right, that's exactly right. So even if we're the only one there, there's going to be an issue. Thomas Hobbes doesn't talk about that. But there will be an issue with the time inconsistency problem where I am unwilling to, my self-interest, my current self-interest, my current self,
Doesn't care about your tomorrow
doesn't
self.
care about my tomorrow self enough to make the right kinds of choices. So I'll make wrong choices today. So what happens is we make choices today that don't allow us, so we would have no manners. We have no manners with ourself, present self, future self. We have no manners with others. And that leaves us in a very chaotic world. And Thomas Hobbes says it's nasty, brutish, and short, that life is nasty, brutish, and short. What I'd like to say is that you are so worried about going out in the world because of the chaos that exists there and the potential actions of all those around you. So think of yourself as walking into a colony of individuals that you don't understand, you don't know what their incentives and motives are at all, and you walk into it. How do you survive in that environment? And you become very self-defensive, and you become very internally focused, and you become and so everybody is that way because of the chaos that has ensued.
That presently that exists without restraint.
Yes.
Being imposed by something.
By
like,
something.
Like a king, right?
Yeah. So, and that's exactly right. So Thomas Hobbes goes right to that point, and he says, well, life without a brutal tyrant is worse than life with a brutal tyrant. So that's the idea, is that if we all have perfect freedom, we build a society that is so intolerable that it's better to be a slave to a king than it is to go, because it allows us to have a better...
Because at least there's some order and some boundary that is set so that there's something that can get done.
Hence, the Leviathan in charge of all is good. So that's Thomas Hobbes. And his argument is not... I mean, his argument is to the extreme, right? That's just the way his argument is. It's to the extreme, and you go, well, humans have good nature in them, and the answer is yes, we do. But we just don't know when we're walking up to meet somebody whether we're going to meet the Dr. Jekyll or the Mr. Hyde version of that person. And because of that, we become significantly less secure. And that lack of security means that we have no freedom. Right? So when we're free to do anything we want at any time, and everybody else is free to... I got it. The best world is that you guys are all constrained, and I get to do anything I want. I am the Leviathan.
Yeah, you're the king.
Yeah, I'm the king. That's the best of all worlds. But that's not the world. That's not the world.
But it's not really the best of all worlds, because then you don't really have a good relationship.
It's not even a
with
best of
people.
all worlds for me, it turns out. That equilibrium isn't good either. And so we move to, what do we mean? And so the Declaration of Independence says that there are three inalienable rights endowed by our Creator, whatever our Creator happens to be. And those three inalienable rights are the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if you were to go to the philosopher, it would have been life, liberty, and the pursuit of property. And what they meant by property is stuff. So the pursuit of stuff. And if you're an economist, we would say, well, the pursuit of stuff is what generates happiness. So yeah, economists are twisted. I got it. but this is the political philosophical side of all of that. And so, what is liberty? And in English, liberty and freedom are synonymous, right? They're synonyms. But when we're thinking about it, liberty must be something different from freedom.
Well,
and that's what your song's about.
yeah, and I'm really using the word freedom, but I'm really talking about what liberty is.
That's right. So somebody says,
and I was learning what liberty or what freedom was, and the difference between freedom and liberty when I wrote the song. So my songs are always a learning for me, and that's just where I was at the time.
So liberty is think of it as freedom reduced one level, right? It's reduced one level to where I recognize that I have rights, but if I have those rights and they're inalienable to me, that means they're also inalienable to you.
Yeah.
And therefore, if I have a right, so for example, if I have a right to life, that implies that you also have a right to life. And that begs the question, if I just want to crush your head with a rock, just because I think it would be fun and it would give me great happiness, pursuit of happiness.
That's not restrained, and that's not.
So my exercise of pursuit of happiness in this particular mechanism violates one of your rights. And so the concept of liberty is that I have inalienable rights, but I have the responsibility to recognize that you have them too. And my job is to keep my inalienable rights and respect yours.
And
that's liberty.
And that has to do with the justice for all part. Liberty and justice, right? Does
yes.
it have to do with justice?
Right. So it's so just like you said, liberty is the just use of freedom or responsible use of freedom. Right, so whatever you define as justice, and a great discussion, at least on the political concept of liberty, was done in the 1850s, maybe 1860s, by John Stuart Mill, and he wrote this pamphlet on liberty, and in it he's talking about exactly those issues, and democracy has come up now, and so people right, the American experiment has been going for not quite 100 years, and there's some levels of democracy in Great Britain, and other places are looking at democracy. So democracy is being examined as a form, and so the question then becomes freedom, liberty. We're looking at Thomas Hobbes and his problem with freedom, and this idea that liberty is this form of constrained freedom where I recognize that I have to
constrain myself.
I constrain myself to honor the rights that you also inalienably have, right? So that's exactly what we're talking about. So that's I have rights, but I don't have the right to violate your rights.
Yeah, and one nation, indivisible. One nation under God, indivisible. That offends you?
I like one nation indivisible.
Well, I mean, I know that's how it started, but that's the deal. One nation indivisible. And so in order to be indivisible, we have to constrain ourselves.
Yes.
Otherwise, we're going to be passionate in ways that constrain everyone's freedom and create chaos.
And so here's the issue with democracy that John Stuart Mill looked at, because that's exactly right. So the problem with democracy is that the definition of social justice through a democratic process is the majority determines what is just. That's the idea of democracy, right? If there's three of us and two of us say it's just,
Yeah.
right? So if there's three of us, there's me and you and a third party who happens to be incredibly wealthy, and you and I decide it's just to take the other person's wealth, by democratic process, that's defined as just.
That's called the tyranny of
The majority.
the majority.
And this,
Pure democracy creates.
pure democracy creates.
That's why we don't have a pure democracy. We're pulling, we're hoping, we're fighting, we're having the ideal of a republic, a democratic republic, or a
representative democracy.
representative democracy, and you called it something else last week.
That's because we have a compound republic. Our republic
Right.
isn't just a government, it's levels of government, and it's split.
And it's split so that it's close to home.
It's split so it's close to home, and it's split so that no individual branch of government has all of the power. Right? So there's lots of reasons for that splitting. And that splitting means that government is ineffective.
And so that means that the whole conspiracy idea that there's this big is a lot harder to
Justify.
enact. Yeah, and to believe in. It's
And the upside of that is that it restrains tyranny, right? Because an effective government is tyrannical.
Yeah.
An ineffective government may not be. I mean, it can be, right? There are ineffective. Sri Lanka just showed that you could have tyrannical, ineffective governments really easily, but purely effective governments tend to be very tyrannical. So the question is, do you want your government to do a lot? And a lot of people say, well, no, I prefer to have liberty than to have. And so the majority is not socially just. At some level, we can define social justice as the will of the majority. But the question is that social justice? Because what do you expect from social justice?
I defined it, I looked this up. Social justice is a moral value that has four interrelated principles which encompass equity, access, participation, and rights. And we're just kind of dealing with rights.
And the concept of equity is a very difficult one, right? Because, right, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to go back to sacred works, because that's where oftentimes the concept of equity comes up and is discussed in many, many forms. And it doesn't matter which set of sacred works you like. So these concepts of equity, these two fundamental concepts of equity, exist in all of the sacred works. Doesn't matter which ones you talk about. Most of us know something of the New Testament. And so in the New Testament, there are two stories that are told, two parables that are told that bring up across the idea of equity. And one of the parables is the parable of the workers. Right? So the owner of the farm goes out and at 6 a.m, and he goes to the place where you hire workers, and he hires workers for a day's work, and they come in and they work for a day. And by noon, he realizes he's not going to get all of his crops in, so he goes back to the place to hire some more workers, and he hires the next set of workers to come in and as an augmentation to what he already has, and they're only going to work half a day because he showed up at noon, but he's going to pay them a full day's wages as well. And then just before the sun sets, he notices he's still got issues, and so he goes back out and he hires a bunch of other workers in the 11th hour, which means that there's only an hour, and he also offers them a full day's wage. And so these people work, and at the back end, they all get exactly the same wage. And that's a form of equity, right? That's a form of equity, and it's called equal outcomes equity. And so that's a form of equity, and we know that people grumble about that form of equity because, you go, fair. It's not fair. I worked all day, and you go, well, but you agreed, and this person agreed, and the fact that you get paid differently has to do with the agreements, but that's okay. But we somehow feel that there's something fundamentally not equitable about it. And in the New Testament, we're told to shut up and just take it. That kind of tough. That is a form of equity. There's a second form of equity that's talked about in the parable of the talents, right? Where I go out and where the master divides his work, his income, his talents amongst three people, and how it's divided is not terribly relevant. We just know that it's not divided equally, and they go forth, and those that take the talents that they're given and produce more are given more, and those that go and take their talents and don't produce more are not given more. Right? Right? It's taken away. So this is the idea of equal opportunity equity, or reap what you sow equity, however you want to think about it. So these are two concepts of equity. And so how do we balance these two ideas of equity that we talk about, these two ideas of fairness that we talk about, that are not, they aren't consistent with one another. They're mutually inconsistent.
Right.
And so how do we balance those? And so as a general rule, if I come in the 11th hour, I'm going to talk about the 11th hour equity. And if I work really hard, I'm going to talk about the reap what you sow equity, and I'm going to call both of them fair, and I'm going to waffle between which one I think is fair, depending upon which one gives me the best outcome, which means my argument about fairness as a general rule is just a bunch of stupid coming out of my mouth, right? Because I'm changing the meaning of fairness as I argue it along, and I want the one that that favors me the most, right? Which is exactly what Thomas Hobbes said you would do. Which is why we have to have these constraints. So the question is, what is social justice? And this equity concept is a very hard one to resolve, and not resolved well even in sacred works. Just pointed out that there are two ways that we think about it, and not resolved, by the way. They aren't resolved. Access. Do we have the same set of rights? Do we have access to the same set of things? And that's a good question, right? Because oftentimes the majority is going to restrict access to the minority, and they do it all the time. It's not a new thing, right?
But sometimes it's not the majority that restricts the access, it's the behavior and the choices of the minority that keep them in the bondage that they are in, that they say is being inflicted upon them. Because many of the people who are in the majority or have more access were in that other place, and they put their nose to the grindstone, and they made the sacrifices required to have that access. It wasn't given to them.
Right. There are lots and lots of examples of exactly that.
Yeah, I mean, you fail all over the place, and if you fail twice and you quit, or you fail 3 times, or even 100 times and quit, you quit too soon.
Right. So that's the one set of access, right? That's the one set of access. What is your grit? What is your stick-to-itness? What is your whatever you want to call it, right?
Yeah.
So there's that one set of access. There's the other set of access where the majority just says, "I'm going to take from you."
Well, yes.
That's another set of access, right?
That is, but that's not all there is what
No,
I'm saying.
I'm just saying that.
But some people will say that it's all against them, and that
Yes, some people will say it's all against them, and it may very well be. I look at our constitutional aspirations.
We could have said that very easily, though. We could have said that very easily.
What's
That
that?
it was all against us.
No, but I look at the constitutional aspirations of the republic for which the
Right.
pledge or the flag stands, and its constitutional aspirations are really, really beautiful. And the Declaration of Independence has very, very beautiful aspirations.
We're going to ignore the door.
They have very beautiful aspirations, and those are just, that's the way it is. But the deal is that those aspirations, when the dirty political mechanisms hit the road, and we exercise democracy to achieve those political aspirations, we do so through majority voting processes, where we fraction ourselves into pieces, and the biggest piece gets its way. And we turn it into an us versus them, which is exactly what Thomas Hobbes says we will do. Except he says we'll fracture all the way down to the individual, causing complete chaos for the universe. John Stuart Mill was very concerned about this fracturing of the public into an us-them solution. And oh, by the way, we've done it. I mean, just look at it, right? So Democrats and Republicans have broken themselves into the us versus them thing. And if I'm a good Democrat, I know that the devil himself lives in the heart of every Republican. And if I'm a good Republican, then I know that the devil himself lives in the heart of every Democrat. And we've fractured ourselves, and we've got this moral value that the others are bad.
So there's no hope.
There is no hope as long as we decide to live that way.
Yeah, unless the individual, unless you're willing to bridle, unless you're willing to do your best to discipline yourself so that you can find that freedom, that you can find the peace, even when you're in the climb of the muck and the muckety muck, and you see somebody else getting something that you think isn't fair, just like James Allen. It's not the good in a person that causes them to have problems. It's not their virtue that causes the struggles in their life. And it's not the wickedness in those who are getting what you think you should be getting because you're so virtuous that causes them to be wealthy or whatever. It's not that. It's you.
Right.
We really do.
My virtue brings my benefit. My vice brings my downfall.
And we all have all of it. So it's just laws that we have to follow.
Yeah.
So have we said something pretty
We have
good?
said something, and the most important thing that we said is that if we believe in inalienable rights, the only way you get liberty is that I respect your inalienable right. So if you have the inalienable right to free speech, let's just pretend like it's one of them in the First Amendment, the Constitution. I have the right to speech, right? So I have the right to free speech. That means I have the responsibility to respect your right to speech. That means I can't go and shout down somebody just because they're talking something I don't agree with.
Can't be a
because
troll.
I can't be a troll. I can't be a troll on the internet. I can't be a troll in the classroom. I can't be a troll at a speech. I have to respect their right to speak. Otherwise, I'm generating Thomas Hobbes' natural outcome. And it would be better to have a tyrant than what you are choosing to create.
So kind of the golden rule in a way. At least try to imagine.
Yeah. It's more the platinum rule.
I know. We'll get to that someday.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. D, for joining me in a conversation that is a lot bigger than the time we had. If it interests you, please comment, please subscribe, and I'm Sarah D.
I'm Dr. D.
Make it a great day.
Namaste.
Yikes. Thanks.